Yes.
Okay, welcome to Sicily. As for introduction, I'm not from Sicily, but I've been literally falling in love with Sicily about 20 years ago when I went on a trip in Sicily and I discovered a totally different world. Coming from Trentino, where we need to fight from every little bit of sun every day and try to really capture all the sun we have, I went to a land where I realized that the sun and the nature was incredible and so generous. And I realized that there is a reason why the Roman used to say that Sicily used to supply all the corns for the Roman Empire. And it's incredible the kind of generosity and abundance of sun and nature that Sicily has. And I very quickly realized that in Sicily, there are some really incredible condition for grape growing. Well, you obviously know a lot about Sicily, but starting from the beginning, what I realized that Sicily is not just an island, is such an incredible puzzle of different territory, terroir, like any region, obviously, of the world. But before going there and really traveling around, I have the misconcept that Sicily was kind of a big island. Everybody heard about Sicily, but there are so many little different things, area pockets that really makes Sicily a world by itself, talking about viticulture. And obviously, the heritage that Sicily has is incredible. If you think that we have so many Greek colonies and still a lot of ruins, we have so many Greek temples, that is unreal. So there is an incredible, Sicily is an incredible melting pot of culture as well as viticulture. In terms of viticulture, I really found a place where I could grow organically, uh, quite frankly, without too much of troubles. I come from a land where usually we do well over 10 treatment a year, even 15, even sometimes more, for in the vineyards. And in Sicily, the first harvest we did after we acquired Santa Teresa was 3, but just in case. So I quickly realized, together with my sister, hey, here we can grow organically. We have a perfect microclimate. Is very sunny, very dry, but at the same time, if you can see where Vitoria is located here on the map, we're pretty close to the sea. And actually, the beauty is that in the summer, we always have an afternoon sea breeze blowing from the sea to the north that really dries out the grapes, the vines. So it's really very, very interesting. And, from a viticulture standpoint of view, it's fantastic. I've been growing grapes in Sicily, in different part of Italy, in Tuscany, in different part of Italy, but Sicily is really unique. At the same time, I,
Oh, okay.
growing grapes organically is not just not using pesticide.
Isn't the man coming shortly?
What?
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's okay.
Okay, gonna go ahead. So it's not just a question of using pesticide. It's really to start understanding. Obviously, you start the organic growing process by not using pesticide and following the book and making the accreditation. But then after year after year after year, we realize that organic is not just not using pesticides. So it's really to let the nature going back and take possess of how the vineyards grow. So it's not just a question of not using pesticides. So we started by using or trying to allow the nature to really grow back and take possess. So we actually have decided to let a lot of orange trees and olive trees to grow within our estate to allow this biodiversity, which is made of all different little things that are within the estate. And it is really very, very important that all these different things are allowed to grow back. At the same time, for example, we have reintroduced here, for example, Um, you know, we allow the weeds to grow in between the rows, and this allows that biodiversity. And at the same time, you have all these microorganisms that grow, that live on the top part of the soil, that really makes a unique difference. Very rightly, we just felt so much in love that after both having bought Santa Teresa in 2002, we bought a second estate in 2016, which is called Cortese. The Cortese estate is only about 8 kilometers away from Santa Teresa. And at the beginning, the idea was to really try to extend the production of Santa Teresa. But actually, we realized in the first harvest, it was too late to touch anything, that the grapes and what we found on the estate was very, very different. So we decided to keep the two estates separate because they were giving totally different things. Luckily, the Cortese estate has always been growing grapes organically. So for us, it was very simple to have two estates organically grown, and within the same territory, we had very, very major differences. Um, Let me go back a little bit on the territory of Vitoria. Vitoria is very, very important because it's a unique area where there is the first and only DOCG in Sicily, that is Cerasuolo Vitoria. I'm sure you're all familiar with, is a blend of Nero d'Avola and Frappato. And, it is a very interesting DOCG because it's one of the smallest DOCG. We're about 20 producer, from grape growers to bottlers and selling, the wine in bottle. So it's very, very small. Not a huge production because overall, I think the overall production is less than 2 million bottles between the whole thing. So it's a very, very small estate. At the same time, is one of the lowest yield allowed because we're only allowed 52 hectoliters per hectare production, which means that it's less than 7,000 bottles per hectare. So it's very tiny, small production. And if you compare it with the most famous DOCG, is a much more reduced. It's not because we're the best, but it's because, in that territory and in that terroir, that is the production that it really puts the vineyard in balance. I've seen that in the group there is Michelle Shah, and Michelle was at Santa Teresa probably 15 years ago. And we've done a lot of changes since then. We actually have certified organic, but at the same time, as I said before, we have worked very, very hard in the viticulture. When you grow organically, our aim objective is to grow the best quality grapes we can organically. And over the years, what we have realized is that by letting the grapes grow in organically, you allow the actual typicity and the varietals to really become more and more important. So the Nero d'Avola from that corner of the estate is different from the other corner. And actually, you find a lot of diversity. And it's very simply because the actual clone of the variety really can express his style much more within the limitation of where it's planted. So the essence of what terroir means. So, let me take you through the two estates, because I think by showing you the differences between the two estates, which are, believe me, only 8 kilometers away from each other, you can understand that within this area here, there is such an enormous diversity. So let's start from looking at the vineyard. And you can see here, for example, this is the vineyard of Cortese. Let me take you through, our canopy management. At Cortese, the majority of the canopy is with the Guyot system, while at Santa Teresa, we have part of it with sprung cordons, but now we're changing everything in Guyot system. We have realized that with the Guyot system, we allow the Nero d'Avola and the Frappato to flourish much better and to have the vine in balance. With the sprung cordons, by forcing the curve and double curve on the spur, we actually were forcing the vines and actually making it suffering so much that was developing too much wood, if you know what I mean. So it was expanding between the two spurs too much of a wood, so it was expanding too much. And at the same time, after 12, 15 years, the vine was really suffering. And actually with the Guyot, actually, we realized that the vine, even after 15, 17, 18 years, really produced really good grapes and doesn't suffer too much. So we're now changing everything from sprung cordons to Guyot. And, we realized that we can get a more homogeneous production. And actually we allow the vine to produce more in balance. We're not a great believer that the vine should suffer. The vine should be put in balance, especially when you grow organically. Let me show you actually the stratification of our soil. This is Santa Teresa. Santa Teresa, the typicity of Santa Teresa is this top red soil, but I mean, super red. It's very rich in minerals. Obviously, there is a lot of iron and minerals, but at the same time, what is really different is that it's very, very sandy. If you work mechanically, this top part of it, it creates a very, very soft sand. And this is really very, very important because we do work the soil constantly during the summer in order to keep the topsoil very, very soft. And this helps to avoid dehydration in the lower part. Because if you work the soil, what happens is you make a very, very top part of the soil very, very soft, and you trap the air within the earth, and you create a kind of very good isolation. It's the same effect you have when you go to the seaside, and the topsoil, the sand on the top is very, very hot. But if you dig 20 centimeters down, is really wet, and it's because the sand itself is a very good isolator. So we have then between 2 and 3 meters of limestone, and this can be really, really hard. It's very interesting because at the same time, it does have some cracks. As you can see down here, you can see some of the roots of the nearby vineyards that have dig down very, very deep in order to find the lower layer, which is a mixture of soil, where all the winter rain and humidity is trapped. So during the winter, you have the water percolating down through this hard limestone and going down here and to be trapped on the bottom soil. So you can imagine how important it is to create this top layer isolation in order to avoid any crack going through it and dehydrating the soil. Because obviously you need humidity, you need drainage, and you need obviously water to grow grapes in Sicily. This is very, very important. On the contrary, this is what we have found at Cortese, only 8 kilometers away. You can see by the color is different. So it's a much darker, no red, so it's really brown. So it has less mineral, but is rich clay and is a very important skeleton. So we have a lot of stones. And then this part here is it's up to 2 meters, very, very thick limestone, and is a much harder limestone than the one we have at Santa Teresa. And then down here, it goes down even more, and then you have more compact skeleton. If you look at the two side by side, you can see the difference, and it's really amazing. And you can see by the color, but also, obviously, you cannot appreciate here how hard this part is as Cortese and as Santa Teresa. Well, all this to say that we have two different worlds, only 8 kilometers aside. Plus the fact, we've been so lucky that when we went to Santa Teresa, we found a few vineyards of very, very old Nero d'Avola and Frappato. And what we have realized is that this Nero d'Avola and Frappato were not coming from any known place, but they were grape variety that have been growing there for I don't know how long. Just to give you an idea, Santa Teresa dates back 1697. So they've been growing grapes for quite a while there. So we decided to keep that clone because obviously this is what we call a selezione massale. So is on the estate selection. and which is something that is pretty unique. So we've decided to use this very clone for all the new planting as Santa Teresa for Nero d'Avola. So we take the spur, we take it to the greenhouse, and they make our own barbatelle with the rootstock we want in order to produce that very clone of Santa Teresa, Nero d'Avola, and that very clone of Frappato, which I'm going to show you in a minute. At the same time, at Cortese, we found different clones of Frappato and Nero d'Avola, and we decided to keep them there and to keep the diversity. And incredibly, the wines are so different. So we're still talking about grapes here, but the end result is incredibly different. So just in a nutshell, what we say about biodiversity. So we let the weeds to grow, and especially in winter, we don't use any fertilizer, but we use the favino. So every second row, we actually plant the favino, which we let it grow during the winter. And in the early spring, we mash it into the soil, and this is enough fertilizer to let the grapes growing. At the same time, we have a lot of local herbs and local trees within the states, and this really helps to bring back the bees, because bees is very, very important. But we have a decent production of olives. We don't sell any olive oil, we sell the olives, but it's important to keep the diversity, because the different flowers, the different trees and flowers that grows within the states create this unique environmental that is really typical. And this is what made Santa Teresa what it is today. So we don't want to change it. So as you can see here, we use our own spur of Nero d'Avola and Frappato, but actually we are now planting some new vineyards. But this is extremely important. Let me show you the Avulisi. This is the vineyard that I was telling you before, is a 1962. Actually, this is not 100% correct, because it's the oldest vineyard and it dates back between 1962 to 1965. And that's where all the Nero d'Avola comes from. You can see the beauty of this vineyard. It obviously has a very limited production, but the quality really makes a special wine, and actually make a special selection, a single vineyard, Nero d'Avola, which is really phenomenal and really producing phenomenal effect. This vineyard has always been organic. When we bought the estate, nobody was really taking care of this vineyard, was almost abandoned. As you can see, we actually managed to put it together, because is not ideal, but we really want to make it to grow back to some production in order to make sure that we get some bunches, and the quality we get out of it here is really phenomenal. But let me try to show you actual, and apologies for the picture, but I've taken this picture and I finished 2 weeks ago, between side by side, the Nero d'Avola from Cortese and from Frappato. These are Nero d'Avola. They are classified as Nero d'Avola. This is the clone that we found at Cortese, and this is the clone we found at Santa Teresa. Obviously, the picture are taken about 3 weeks away, and obviously the one at Santa Teresa has been taken a week ago, while the one at Cortese was taken before. But you can already see by the shape and by actually the size of the berries that are completely different clones, even though the grape variety is the same. So you can imagine that making one wine out of these two different grape varieties would have been an insult to nature. So we decided to keep it separate. And actually, the wine difference is phenomenal and incredible. Have a look at the Frappato. Two totally different brothers. It's like, the slim and skinny one, and the fat, bold and masculine one, the muscle one, is two incredible different clones, but still producing Frappato. So the same style of Frappato, but two different interpretation or two different personalities. And quite frankly, this is the beauty of our business, because if you try to understand the nature of the grape variety and you try to interfere as little as possible with winemaking production to make wine out of these beautiful grapes, I think we made justice to the nature. And don't forget that we work 12 months in a year in a vineyard, and 5, 7 weeks in winemaking. So anything that we work really hard in the vineyard should be preserved in the winemaking process. That's the reason why we focus so much on viticulture, and our winemaking is so damn simple, because the last thing we want to do is to ruin what we have picked. So all the attention is on viticulture, grape picking, and really making sure that we actually make the lightest and the softest possible winemaking process in order to really keep the style and the character of the grape varieties perfectly intact as it is, and as Mother Nature gave us, luckily. Let me show you the Frappato Santa Teresa. So you've seen the single bunch, but I just wanted to show you how difficult this grape variety is, because you can see here, for example, when this Frappato was not ready to be picked, but we finished picking today the Frappato, and it was not much different. So what is typical of Frappato is that you have a bunch and you have different ripening process between, within the same bunch. So you have some that are already turned really dark red, some of them that are about to turn, and some of them that will never be turn dark. It is a grape variety that really mature unevenly, and at the same time it has a very, very thin skin. And this is the beauty of the Frappato, because a wine that has such an elegant style and very fruit driven. And most of the time in a blind tasting, nobody guessed that this 100% Frappato that we produce at Santa Teresa comes from Sicily. Most of people believe it comes from the north, because it's such a fruit driven, such an incredible, elegant style that really doesn't seems to come from a hot climate area. At the same time, we started to grow some white grapes at Santa Teresa, as such as Grillo, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Grillo is a beautiful grape variety, is the big brother, we call it, because look how well it grows and how generous it is. At the same time, don't forget that in Sicily, especially in this area, production is always kind of not huge. I can tell you that today we finished picking, and I actually calculated how much we picked, and we picked an average of about 6.9 tons per hectare. So is not huge. Some of it was a little larger, like the Grillos, you can see, but some of it was much lower, like 3.5. So it can be various, but it's never huge. I'm used to different kind of production here in Trentino or in other area. At the same time, this is what we do in the vineyard. And what is very critical, that what we realized also growing organically, is that the time of picking comes very quickly. We have learned with our local people when to pick the grapes. And obviously, we check the residual sugar, we check the acidity, we check the pH, but at the same time, we always check and taste the grapes. And by doing this, you really understand how the grapes is ripening. I give an example. About 2 years ago, when we had 3 vintages ago, when we had an incredible drought, there was a time when it was so dry that the vine stopped ripening, and actually, because of the lack of water, the vine was taking back the humidity from the grapes in order to keep it alive. So we had a lot of dehydration. So we had a very, very high content of sugar without having the phenols ready. So it was a kind of nonsense, like, very high in sugar, but no phenols. So you could have ended up with a wine that has a lot of alcohol, but not enough structure and tannins. So what we did was actually to start using irrigation and actually to delay the time of picking, even though we were running the risk of having a very, very high risk alcohol ending up. But what happened was that the actual development of the sugar stopped, and actually we ended up by having a more balanced grape and wine at the end, because we managed to let the phenols ripen better, because we managed to get back water into the bunches. I don't know if I managed to explain it right. So it's very, very fine tuning. At the same time, don't forget that by growing organically, grapes react very, very quickly. Time of picking, as Santa Teresa we learned, is very, very important. If we miss the right time of picking, the grapes overripe. 2019, 18, it was a very, very hot summer, and we got some grapes that were literally sunburned. Uh, I have a friend of mine that was growing Merlot. He actually had the Merlot that it was so dry they couldn't process through the machine because there was not enough humidity to process the grapes. So it was like having raisins on the vines. So that's what organic means, that the whole process is very nature driven, but nature can change dramatically, especially if you get, for example, Scirocco, which is the southern wind blowing, which literally can dry the whole of the island within 3 days. So it's incredible. 3 years ago, we had 5 days, 31st of July, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd and 4th of August. We had 46 during the day and 36 at night, literally, and always blowing the wind, and it was dramatic. So what we do, basically, we do all our best to grow the best possible grapes. We pick by hand, and what we do actually, we pick by hand, we put it in 15 kilo boxes, all the grapes. We bring it to the winery. Before actually starting any process, we actually put all the grapes in a container, and it's basically a lorry that we rented during the harvest, where is an insulated and is a refrigerator. So we put it in, it's like a refrigerated container. We drop the temperature for at least one night until the temperature of the grapes reaches 4 to 6 centigrade temperature. And this is very, very important, excuse me, because before touching the grapes have a lower temperature. You can imagine that when we pick the grapes in Sicily, even though if you pick it in the morning, the grapes always reach the cellar at about 26 to 28 centigrade temperature. So usually what you do, you process the grapes, you drop the temperature of the must, but with the, if you make them must already, you have to either destem the grapes or put it through a pump, so you actually work on the grapes. But we decided to actually drop the temperature before even touching the grapes. So all the boxes goes into this container, we drop the temperature. When the temperature is dropped, after 1 day up to 2 days, we start to process the grapes. This has also the advantage that we can actually put together all the grapes coming from a particular vineyard, even if we don't manage to pick it in a day. So you can imagine, we finish up, we store it. Once it's stored and drop the temperature, we process this whole lot. So all the vinification process starts with a temperature of about 4 to 6 centigrade temperature. Very, very important, because you have a little treasure of low temperature that brings you back to the winemaking process. So typically, as I said before, our main winemaking process is very, very simple. We always destem the grapes, white or red. The white grapes then goes into the pneumatic press. We have a very, very soft pneumatic press working depression. So very, very soft pressure, maximum 0.3 bars. And then what we do very typically, we do a static sedimentation for about 48 hours. And then we ferment at about 19 centigrade temperature, not much below that. And then once the fermentation is finished, we rack the wine and we let it sit on the fine lees of the fermentation up until, I would say, February, March, or even April of the following year. I'm not a crazy fan of um, bottling white wine too early, especially this quality of wine. They need time to rest and to develop and to express themselves. And actually, resting on the fine lees really helps to bring out, all the typicity. At the same time, it does help what we call it leesy, which means, when the yeast is breaking up and releasing all the inside elements that have it, that is very, very important in order to get the stability of the wine and protection of the wine. So it's very, very simple. Then eventually we have a Grill of Guinea blend. We make the blend and we bottle and we put it on the market around April, May, June of the following year. For the red grapes, actually, we're having a lot of fun because we started to reintroduce some very old technique. You may laugh about this, but I tell you what, the quality results we had is phenomenal. So let's start with this. We started to reintroduce the open top barrique fermentation. We started as a joke, but it ended up to be a very, very interesting process. Two things, or many, many advantages. First of all, obviously, not all the red grapes goes in here, but just the best selection, and just our best Nero d'Avola goes into this system of fermentation. So cold temperature, we drop the temperature of the grapes, we destemp the grapes, and actually we have a very, very soft crusher, which really just very, very softly crush the grapes. And actually then we go into a single barrique fermenter. Great advantage because the volume is about 150, 180 liters of liquid, and then the skins. So the advantage is that the volume itself is not enough to produce too much temperature. So the temperature of fermentation that carries on naturally does not exceed 20, 22 centigrade temperature, doesn't go too hot because the volume is so small. At the same time, there's no pumping over, it's all pressed down by hand. So we have very, very gentle, no mechanical in here. So once the wine is vinified here, is all done naturally. When the malolactic fermentation is finished, we rack the wine. And here, actually, we started this process about, this is the fourth vintage, 2020 is the fourth vintage. And actually, every year we have a different time of skin contact, depending on the harvest. But, we have a minimum of 3 weeks up to 4.5 weeks, depending on the maturity, how the grapes are, and all different aspects. We actually decide year on year based upon tasting, and that is the skills of the winemaking that really makes the difference. It's very interesting because we have reintroduced this system, and actually the interaction with the wood and the amount of oxygen that is allowed through this open top barrique process really makes a wine that has a good extraction of tannins, but at the same time, extremely soft tannins. So very good color extraction, but at the same time, very, very stable. Very interesting wine. Different dimension, totally different composition of the tannins, and very, very, what we call it, integrated structure. So the wine already after malolactic fermentation, you can really understand that it's much balanced, and you have the tannins, the acidity, and the structure and the alcohol that are really coming out already very well balanced, and that has proven to be extremely interesting. Then at the same time, what we've done, look at this. Oh, amphora. There's been a lot of work about this, and very interesting. Again, it was almost a joke. We bought 2 amphora, and we're still on the learning curve. Now we have, I think, a total of 12 amphora. You have totally different philosophy here. So you need to decide where the terracotta comes from, how it is made, temperature, grain, composition, and da 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 da. Okay, our choice was to go to Tuscany. Very simply, I think there's nobody in Italy that have more experience on terracotta than in Tuscany. And obviously, my winemaker Stefano Girelli is from Tuscany, and he has a lot of experience on it. So obviously, went to Impruneta, where I think they understand about terracotta quite a lot. They have hundreds and hundreds of year experience. We chosen this shape and this size, which is about 7.2 hectoliters per amphora. And the terracotta is a beautiful element. It's very porous, and the terracotta allows a lot of oxygen to go through. Obviously, it's not varnish inside; it's all natural, because obviously, if you use any varnish inside, you miss the whole point. But obviously, you have a container that allows a lot of oxygen in. So after the first period, the wine would tend to go through oxidation very quickly. So I don't know, I'm sure you've tasted a lot of wine produced in amphora, but most of the time they don't have an incredible color, because all the color is being lost because of this extra oxidation. So what we've done was to extend the maceration of the skin up until 1 year. Now we vinify here 100% frappato that goes into the cerasuolo, and actually we ferment the frappato here, and actually the wine stays on the skins for 1 year. Just prior to the next vintage, we rack the wine, we take it out. This year we've taken out at the end of August, and actually this is important because the skins and the pips provides the tannins that compensate the oxygen and actually make happen what is called the polymerization of the tannins, so creates a bigger structure, and actually it creates a softer tannins without oxidizing the wine. So it's a wine that is very, very soft, very large on the palate, that obviously after staying in amphora for 1 year needs some time in barrels in order to really go to the next level, to the next maturation and elevation. But actually it's very interesting because it develops a middle palate that is really incredible, and it's because this incredible extraction of the tannins is really compensated by the amount of oxygen that really creates a very, very soft palate. So it's a different layer of tannins, very, very interesting. With the combination of the frappato, but this frappato, the frappato from Cortese, not from Santa Teresa, because the Cortese from Santa Teresa does not have the right structure of the skins, is important to have it. It would be interesting to have you tasting this wine by itself, because it's a very, very interesting wine. Obviously, this wine after fermentation is blended together with the Nero d'Avola to make the frappato, and then they sit for about a year in barrels before being released. We also have reintroduced here, for some of the Nero d'Avola that goes in the frappato Santa Teresa, the 30 Slovenian oak barrels fermentation. So we have turned these barrels into fermenting barrels, and we change few things, but actually we are fermenting the Nero d'Avola for Cortese in these 30 hectoliters barrels. We also have started to reintroduce the use of semi-large barrels for the aging of the wine together with some of the barriques, which really helps to bring the wine to the level of maturation and elevation we want. We believe that aging the barrels is a way to elevate the quality of your tannins. Is not, a kind of, how you call it, flowering process, or, adding something. Is something that is needed to elevate the quality of the tannins. So it's very, very important, because I'm not selling liquid oak, I'm selling wine that needs to be matured in oak in order to develop its own optimum character and its own optimum style. So all this to say that we try to go back to our grapes and to try to express through our vinification in the traditional way the best possible quality of that very grape variety. That's in a nutshell what we do. Sorry. I've been a little too long. Sorry about this. Any questions?
Stefano, nice to see you again.
Ciao.
Ciao. No, I just wanted to say that it's an amazing, beautiful property, and it was very, very interesting to see the difference between the soils and the different characteristics of the grape, same grape varieties grown in the two different areas, yet very close to each other. It's a great example of biodiversity. Thank you.
That you see, this is our business. You know, we need to try to bring it to the bottle, this diversity, and there are consumers out there that will appreciate this, no matter what. You know, you may like it or you may not like it, but at least has its own typicity and identity. And I think, you know, that is our duty. So to preserve the soil, to work in sync with nature, to preserve the nature, but at the same time to promote biodiversity and diversity through the world. Consumers now are exposed to a number of choices, and we need to supply them with.
Cool. Could you possibly bring me back in 10 minutes? I'm just finishing a Zoom meeting. Thanks. Bye-bye.
And Stefano, how long have you been doing the amphora?
This is the fourth vintage. As I said, Michelle, we started off with 2 amphora. We said, okay, we'll give it a try. And then, not too bad. Then we bought another 4, and then another 4, and another 4. It's very interesting. We believe that, you know, there are different philosophies. A lot of people just bury them. I think, you know, it's important to keep them out in order, because they're very porous. They allow a lot of air. If you put it under soil, you get a lot of moisture and kind of funny nose, which, you know, we work on purity and really finesse. And also cleaning, not being varnished inside is very, very important. So in between the two winemaking process, there is a lot of deep cleaning. And because we don't use any detergent, it has to be done with hot and cold water, but it means a lot of water. So it does require a lot of time, and you need to make sure that it's cleaned properly. And if it is buried, it's kind of challenging, if you know what I mean.
Stefano, I have a question. Actually, just one request. I think we've lost Liz somewhere, but please do mute your speaker, because some of them are on and we can hear in the background. Stefano, I had a question earlier. You were talking about soil management, and if you can throw some light on floor management for retaining cool temperatures to allow moisture to go down. How do you deal with the cover crop situation? You were mentioning something in terms of alternate plants that you grow. Could you just throw some light on floor management?
Oh,
and
well,
yeah,
listen,
there seem to be different styles.
Then simple. We, during the winter, what we do, we finish the harvest today. Basically, what we do, we let the leaves to fall on the floor, then we do the pruning, but we don't work the soil during the winter, apart from the fact that we sow the favino. During, you know, around October, end of October, we sow the favino, which is a fava beans that really provides the nutriment, you know, for the following year. Then, you know, we let the weeds to grow in between vines during the whole winter. And then we actually, the only thing we do, especially in Santa Teresa, we work the soil in order to protect it from dehydration. Because of the composition of this soil here, Santa Teresa, because it's very, very sandy and not compact, this is like pressed sand, but the pressed sand can be easily cracked. So what happens is, if you don't work the topsoil, creating this soft part of it, like, you know, sand, you immediately have some cracks, and, you know, the cracks, the heat goes down here and really creates a lot of dehydration. But if you work constantly and mechanically the soil on the top, you actually protect this from dehydration. This is less necessary at Cortese, because the soil here, as you can see, has a totally different composition, is a more mixture, and has a harder situation that doesn't really get so much affected by cracking and dehydration. And actually this soil here is more compact and protects from dehydration much better. We do work the soil, but it's not as much as we do at Santa Teresa. And that's the reason why at Cortese, we let the weeds to grow longer, and we work the soil much less than at Santa Teresa, where it's absolutely necessary to avoid dehydration. Otherwise, all the water we use is going to be evaporated very quickly. Does this answer your question?
Yes, it does. And just one more on that note about compost and mulching. Do you have any views on that?
No, we actually, thank you for asking. I think at the end of next year, we're starting a whole project on recycling all our water. So instead of using a depurator, we use it a natural system. So we create our own pond where we have different stations where the water gets cleaned naturally, and then we reuse the water in the vineyards. So we try to be self-contained. This actually is the end of a process that we started some time ago. Probably when Michelle was at Santa Teresa, we told her that we were using our 3-well water. But let me go back here. Let me show you one thing. As you can see here, we are about 15 kilometers from the sea, Vitoria. So we're very close to the sea. We had 3-well pumping water from 120 meters below the soil, 150 meters. But what we realized over the years, after 20 years of pumping water, we realized that the content of salt in the water was slightly increasing. So there was a very, very clear sign that we were attracting in the soil, the salty water, which would have killed the whole thing. So what we decided to do was to stop that, and actually started about 6 months ago. We actually finished a project of connecting with the local reservoir in order to use water from a local reservoir and use only rain water, which actually is a much better quality. So again, preserving that water, but at the same time, now obviously being a winery, we use a lot of water, and we want to make sure that we don't waste the water, and that's the finish of the project of taking care of the water. Little things, but it's important.
Hello, can everyone hear me again now?
Yes.
Yes.
Good, okay. Stefano, that's great. Thank you very much. There are a couple more questions on the marketing side. What are the main markets for Sarasota di Vitoria, and do you have an US importer?
Okay, main market is obviously local market. Unfortunately, and I hope things will change soon, Sarasota di Vitoria is not very well known. You see, Sarasota di Vitoria is a beautiful wine. It's very elegant, and actually, I think it could have an incredible success. But as I said before, it's a very, very small DOCG. We're not very powerful. We're very, very small. We're very kind of countryside, marketing guys, and we try our best to make the Sarasota known being around the world. In the States, we have an importer. It's called Vias. It does sell our wines reasonably well. It does have a reasonable follow-up in kind of innovative market like New York, New Jersey, California, Colorado, this kind of trendy markets. But I think there is a long way to go for Sarasota di Vitoria to be known, and hopefully consumer will understand the elegance and the typicity of Cerasuolo, which is a beautiful, because the combination of Nero d'Avola and Frappato really makes a unique wine. You have the structure of the Nero d'Avola and the beauty, elegance of the Frappato that really makes it a unique wine.
Excellent. Are there any more questions from anyone? We've probably reached about the normal time we finish. Apologies to everyone for the technical problems, and a huge thank you to Stefano for a fascinating talk about something which most of us, I think, know very, very little about, a part of Sicily and grapes that we just don't know. So thank you very much indeed, Stefano.
Well, thank you
And
very much.
we hope we'll have the opportunity to taste your wines
hope
more
so.
in the future.